Hello, I'm Harrison Orr, and in this presentation we will dive into the topic of providing or not providing course PowerPoint slides, specifically the impact of instructor-provided slides upon student attendance and performance. The journal article being considered comes from Computers in Education, an international journal from 2015, and is authored by Deborah L. Worthington and David G. Levasseur. I chose this particular article for a few reasons. First, since I started teaching, I've built up a personal notebook of what instructional techniques work for both myself and my students, but I'm always looking for ways to improve my instructional technique. Second, I've taught with a wide variety of instructional styles. This includes the use of PowerPoint slides, having no visual aids and teaching straight from notes, or just using the textbook as a visual aid. I just switched to a new textbook in my communications class, and it came with slides. I decided to use the slides for a few reasons. Most of my undergrad engineering classes use PowerPoint slides, and second, in communications, there are a lot of graphs that aren't easily drawn, plus the ability to animate those graphs is advantageous. I took this as a great opportunity to do some research on the topic and finally see conclusively if using PowerPoint slides is beneficial to students or if it isn't. PowerPoint is now an integrated part of the educational paradigm. Earlier research suggests that the majority of studies comparing PowerPoint instruction against other methods have failed to find significant differences in learning outcomes. But the only studies to find learning improvements from PowerPoint involved more than merely integrating slides into the class instruction. In these studies, students also had access to copies of the course slides. This would suggest that if instructors want their PowerPoint slides to aid in learning, then they need to make those slides available to their students. Finally, some common fears of providing course slides are that providing notes discourages students from creating their own notes, and that providing notes leads to poorer attendance. Let's talk about the methodology of this study. The population consisted of 204 students enrolled in a large lecture communication theory course at Northeastern University over 2 semesters. Of those participating, 78% were female, with an average age of 20 years old. The majority were also sophomores. The course structure was the same for both semesters, with the only difference being the availability of slides. Slides provided for the class were visual, used text sparingly, and were devoid of sounds or animations. Availability of slides for students was limited to 3 conditions. First, no slides, where students could not access any copies of the course slides. Second, partial slides, where slides were made available in handout form with only keywords provided. An example of handout form is shown on the next slide. Finally, full slides, which is handout form but in much greater detail. The study involved 3 separate lecture units relating to course material. The first, Expectancy Violation Theory, or EVT. Secondly, Interaction View, or IV. And finally, Face Negotiation Theory, or FNT. In the first semester, for the EVT and IV units, students received no slides, while for the FNT unit, students received partial slides. In the second semester, for the EVT and IV units, students received no slides, and for the FNT unit, students received full slides. Student performance was measured by responses to exam questions. In addition, a survey was conducted at the conclusion of each unit to gauge student reactions. Student responses to survey questions were gathered using either a Likert scale or yes-no answers. I have included some examples of survey questions below. For example, students were asked if they accessed copies of the course slides and could respond with either a yes or a no. For Likert scale type questions, students were posed questions such as, "I found it difficult to take notes during the class unit on expectancy violation theory." Let's take a look at the results, starting with the research questions. Research question 1 asked if attendance rates differ between students with access to course slides and students without access to course slides. The researchers found no statistical difference in attendance between students who had no access to slides and students with access to partial slides. Research question 2. Will students with access to copies of course slides achieve higher scores on course exam questions pertaining to those slides than students without such access? Scores of students who had access to no slides were compared to scores of students who received partial slides. The researchers found no significant difference in student performance between students with access to partial slides and those with no access to slides at all. Research question 3. Will students utilizing copies of course slides in the note-taking process achieve higher scores on course exam questions pertaining to those slides than students who do not use copies of course slides to take notes? The data showed that students who take slides to class scored slightly less than students who did not take slides to class. However, this result was not statistically significant. Research question 4. Will students who can access copies of course slides containing a full set of class notes outperform students who can only access course slides containing partial class notes? Scores from the exam on the FNT unit were sampled from students who received partial slides and compared to the same scores for those who received full slides. The data showed that students who received full slides did not outperform those with access to partial slides. Finally, research question 5. Does the effect of instructor-provided slides upon class performance vary by academic achievement levels? Students were divided into 3 groups based on their cumulative GPA. High 3.2 to 4.0 GPA, medium 2.71 to 3.19 GPA, and low for all students below 2.71 GPA. The researchers found no significant impact was observed between GPA and exposure to slides for any of the units. Now let's discuss some of the findings of this study. The vast majority of students reported using slides to help study for exams, but surprisingly though, far fewer students reported taking slides to class to assist in note-taking. Furthermore, the results show that providing slides has no effect, both positive or negative, on student attendance. This is consistent with student responses to the survey question of, would providing lecture slides alter their attendance? Students responded that providing lecture slides would have no effect on their attendance. On the issue of course performance, attendance along with student cumulative GPA were the greatest predictors of performance in the course. Student responses indicate that providing access to course slides is advantageous to course success. However, the study found that there were no academic benefits to providing course slides. In fact, students taking the course with no slides did just as good as the ones with slides. An interesting trend was observed when the researchers viewed the data for the EVT and FNT exams. The data showed that bringing slides to class to assist in note-taking actually had a negative effect on student performance on those exams. There were several obvious limitations to this study. First, the study only looked at one course. Data may be completely different for other courses in other disciplines, such as engineering, human resources, political science. Second, the study relied on self-reported data. As we know, self-reported data might not be the most accurate form of data collection, as student opinions of their performance may differ greatly from reality. Finally, student academic performance can be affected by many variables. Students may have other issues that impact their academic performance beyond the depth of their notes. In conclusion, the study found that there were no academic benefits for providing slides. However, literature on the topic suggests that any aid designed to assist students with their note-taking should lead to better notes and ultimately better grades. But slides cannot assist in note-taking if students do not bring them to class. Roughly 50% of students downloaded course slides if they were available, while between 36% and 47% actually brought them to class. Also, academically stronger students were just as likely as weaker students to bring course slides to class. For those who actually did bring copies of the slides to class, the study concluded that bringing slides to class has either no effect or actually an adverse effect on student performance. Finally, I didn't quite find what I was looking for. I desired a conclusive answer to the question of providing slides or not providing slides and which one is better. I did find that for the most part, providing slides does not hurt. I consider this an acceptable outcome. Personally, I can say that so far this semester, providing slides has had a positive effect in my communications class, both for the students and myself. Overall, this study has merit, and I would like to review more material on the topic at some point before I formulate a definitive opinion on the matter.